All right. All right, Mike, what's going on, man?
David, what in the world did you just send me?
I just sent you Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin doing the Badger dance on stage at EdCon 2018 in Toronto, Canada. If you remember that old YouTube video, there was like a snake and badgers dancing. For some reason, at the end of the conference, all the speakers did that dance on stage. It's amazing. You should look it up.
I
It's very
I
motivating.
just became an Ethereum bear.
Yes, I think I'm feeling similarly, even though at the end I'm going to contradict myself and talk about why I think Ethereum is maybe one of the best positioned investments that I think I'm going to make this year. So, obviously, let's dive in. Today's going to be a little bit different of an episode because Ethereum is just a giant topic. There's no way we're going to be able to cover everything. So, rather than sort of having me do the introduction and then have Mike break down the features and then get into predictions, we're going to sort of break down some of the simple aspects of this application step by step, just to really give you the basics, the bare bones overview. Obviously, do your own research here. Obviously, there is so much more you can dive into. You've probably heard of it before. And so, what we're going to try to do is just make it really simple and just give you the highest level sort of tip of the iceberg so you can do your own research. So, let's jump in by starting with actually Bitcoin. So we've covered Bitcoin in the past. We know that Bitcoin is this essentially digitally native currency that solves this very important problem called the double spend problem, which basically just means that we keep one ledger of all transactions ever created that cannot be tampered with. Nobody can change this big ledger of payments such that they can maybe adjust their own balance or create fraud. So Bitcoin is a currency. It's a digitally native currency that is uncensorable and it's decentralized. That is the currency use case of a blockchain. Bitcoin also has a blockchain. That's the technology that it runs on. It's also a currency. Now, Ethereum, what is Ethereum? Well, Ethereum is another blockchain, but it has a different purpose. The purpose behind Ethereum is to allow developers to build more blockchain-based applications. So basically, Ethereum, it makes it easier for a new developer to enter the blockchain space and build a new application that has the same benefits as something like the Bitcoin blockchain, in that it is decentralized, in that it has zero downtime, in that it has a built-in governance system. And so really you can think of Ethereum as a platform. And that's the best way to think about it, as a platform that other people are going to build on top of. The currency matters because it's how people are able to tap into the platform and pay for services. But most importantly, just think of Ethereum as the way is a thing that people are going to build applications in the blockchain space on top of. So it's a very foundational layer of this entire cryptocurrency and blockchain trend that we're seeing emerge. Now we're going to dive into some aspects of the product and how it really works, such as why does centralization or decentralization matter? What is a smart contract, which is something you've maybe heard before? What is a decentralized application? Why does that matter? And then Ether as a currency and as an investment. So why don't we start by looking at centralization versus decentralization and why this decentralized web platform that developers can now build on matters. Mike, why don't you start with giving the pros and cons there?
Yeah, so I think of centralized versus decentralized. If you want to use Twitter, for example, Twitter is a company. It's run by a very few people. We would consider that to be centralized. Now, if you want to do the counter of that, imagine that we developed an application that lives on Ethereum. It's set up with the rules of the organization. This is the way things are handled, and the actual application runs in thousands, if not millions, of different places. That would be a decentralized application. So that's kind of the difference between a centralized and a decentralized. Now, why would we want a decentralized version of Twitter? I think there's a lot of reasons why it would be very useful. One is immutability. Basically, no central organization would be able to make changes to the data. What happened is what happened, and no one can tamper with it. And it prevents against corruption. Imagine a rogue organization owning that much data. You wouldn't want them to have that access to that data. But on something like Ethereum, if you built that application on top, the rules would be the rules, and there's no straying from those. So that's a great way to avoid corruption. And another big thing is, like, there's no single point of failure, because the application is running in millions of different places. A server going down does not shut down Twitter or Instagram like we've seen in the past. What do you think about centralization versus decentralization?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the main advantage is really the transparency that it brings to the whole network in terms of the users being able to understand the specific rules. So like right now, what's happening with Facebook and Twitter is there's all these different discussions around censorship and what can live on the platform, what content can't live on the platform. It's very opaque, who's deciding that? What are the rules they're setting? We don't know. And in fact, the reason that they're being regulated or almost being regulated here is because people are demanding to understand what the rules are of the platform. With the decentralized application, the rules are set from the beginning, and they're set transparently, and they're set with code that operates on its own to fulfill the rules of the platform and network. So I think it's basically just the very open version of some of these platforms that we already are starting to challenge because they're so opaque and because they're controlled by so few people. So there still is changes that can happen to the network, but that's based on the quote unquote governance of the network, meaning the users, if they're a holder of the token in some capacity, are able to select whether or not they want to continue using this application, or if they want to change the rules. There's a thing called a fork, which lets you sort of collectively make a decision. Ethereum actually has already had a fork in its past. So yeah, I'd say it just really gives power to the user instead of power to a centralized sort of actor. And there's a lot of other reasons why decentralization makes it more anti-fragile as well. But I think for now, again, let's just return to the really simple idea of Ethereum is a platform that developers can use to build new decentralized applications. And decentralized applications, while not being perfect, have trade-offs that are favorable in some instances over centralized systems, one of which might be something like social media. Now, the way that Ethereum runs is it essentially empowers developers to write code into what are called smart contracts. And smart contracts are very similar to what they sound like in the name. They are computer code that effectively facilitates the exchange of money, of content, of anything of value that really operate on their own. So you can set up code to perform a task on your behalf ahead of time based on certain criteria. Mike, maybe you can give an example smart contract that will help people sort of understand what that might be.
Yeah, I can imagine a time in the future when, say I want to go rent a new apartment, and, my lease starts at the beginning of May, and in order to execute this lease, I set up smart contracts that pay every month on the first of the month, that they just execute as time goes on. So that would be like a time trigger. And on that date, whatever the agreed upon rent would exchange hands automatically. And there's no way for me as the renter to adjust that and kind of pull that funding. The landlord knows that they're going to get their rent. We have a smart contract that's going to autonomously execute. And me as a renter, I know that my landlord can't say, well, I didn't get the rent, or, there's protection on both ends. And I can just imagine a world where all of these trust issues are handled by code. And I think that is the big opportunity that Ethereum is addressing, is how do we not have to trust people? Because we know that people are not trustworthy.
Yeah. Or how do we trust someone that we've never met before? And the answer is sort of, smart contracts and the nature of what they bring to the internet, really. And I think you sort of brought this up, but I want to expand on it, which is really, this is sort of like the language of robots in the future. So if you think about, we have this task that I want a robot to perform for me, a smart contract and developing things on the blockchain is really the language that you're going to use to get these different systems to sort of perform functions on your behalf. So rather than having to go, let's say, in the future, this is sort of an analog version, but it's like I wanted my robot to go walk over to Mike's house to pay him the money for rent on the first of the month next month. Rather than at that time going to the robot, programming the robot to go walk over to your place, I could do that ahead of time with a smart contract, like you explained, and it's just going to happen online digitally. So you can just set up rules and actions and functions in advance without needing to be concerned about trust between intermediaries, such that it functions on your behalf. So I actually think, a big thing that is interesting about Ethereum is that I think it's the language that's going to facilitate a lot of applications in the future that will really perform functions for us, much like the future that we're sort of hoping for of robots doing things for us. It's just going to happen with money and with information, and I think that's really interesting. Now there's a currency aspect to Ethereum as well. So not only is it a platform that people can tap into and use to build a new decentralized application, there's a currency that facilitates and secures that network, and that is Ether, which I'm sure people have heard of before. The reason that there's a currency is really a few things. One, it lets the network sort of function from a secure perspective, because it's the fees that are used sort of help secure the network as Ether are traded around, but also it just functions as the payment system to use the service effectively. So much like you pay Dropbox to use your storage, you acquire Ether tokens to run these different smart contracts and run these different transactions. So the currency aspect is pretty interesting, and it's really how developers are able to pay to use this open service that lets them build.
Yeah, and I think the other way I think about this is I imagine a time in the future when I use my laptop or mobile phone to interface with the world computer, which is what they're trying to basically build. And the computing power that the Ethereum network will be able to handle will be much more sophisticated and powerful than the interface that I'm going to be using, which would be like my laptop, basically just a screen to interface against that supercomputer without everyone having to own a supercomputer. So basically, ETH on if you want to check it out on CoinMarketCap or any of the other places, is the currency that you use to access that application power. Now, the second cryptocurrency consideration here with this is gas. So gas is used to pay miners for basically mining and distributing the ledger across the network. And any smart contract that you create as well requires a certain amount of gas to
Just a fee.
entice those miners to process the transaction. So as far as like the investment thesis here, like if I want to invest in ETH, like what's my bet? What do I think is going to happen that the rest of the world doesn't know is going to happen yet?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the answer to that is that you're betting that more developers will choose Ethereum to build. Well, it's really two things. One, you believe that blockchains will be an important technology in the future that many companies are going to utilize. So that's the first kind of bet. And that's a big bet. I mean, you have to say, I believe that blockchain is the future. Let me give you a few examples of where blockchains seem most promising. The first one is loans, like a company called Dharma. The second one is crowdfunding, which would use smart contracts to allocate the funding. The third is digital collectibles and goods. We saw that with CryptoKitties. Basically, let's say you have a Pokemon card that's super valuable. You could create a digital version that somebody can't copy that is the only one online. We also see Fortnite using digital collectibles. People are paying for that. Supply chains, keeping immutable supply chains, such as transparency in shipping and operations. And then things like prediction markets. We've covered Augur in the past. So essentially, these different potential companies, thanks to this new technology of a blockchain, if you believe that those are the future, that's the first thing you have to say to yourself. I believe that many companies will be built in this space. Now, this is the big sort of second kicker that you also have to believe. I believe that Ethereum, the virtual machine, the world computer, this open source network that developers can tap into, is the network that they will use. This is the biggest one that they will pick. 80% of developers or whatever will choose Ethereum to build their applications on, because without people actually building on Ethereum, it becomes less valuable, less people hold tokens, less people want Ether. So in my opinion, what Ethereum has going for it is many companies, it was early to the market, and many companies are already building on Ethereum. And some of these companies are even locking up quantities of Ether to almost like sort of storing a balance as a business with Ethereum. So I think there's a lot of signs to me that say that Ether is maybe the most important developer platform and will continue to be. But there are challengers. There are other systems that are mimicking what Ethereum is doing and trying to sort of overtake them. So I'd say those are two considerations. Do I believe in blockchain? And do I believe Ethereum will win developer competition for building decentralized applications?
Yeah, right now they're the second highest, if you want to think of market cap for cryptocurrencies, is typically the term people use. I think it's got its flaws as a way of valuing cryptocurrencies, but they're number two. I think they have got a big footprint. So many, even a lot of the ICOs have basically launched on Ethereum, and I think they've got a huge footprint. They've got a first mover advantage when it comes to solving this problem. So I think that is a competitive advantage against the rest of that competition. But the space moves so fast that, one trip up could, wipe them out and they could be gone. So you're making a little bit of a bet that, Vitalik is the right person to help lead and solve this problem.
Yeah, and they're trying. They've had issues in the past. They've had a sort of hack happen, which they fixed, and then they used a fork, which basically means they sort of updated the code base to a different blockchain, such that they could kind of follow the rules that they're hoping to follow. Really, the biggest risk, in my opinion, is that it's humans writing this code. I think the open source protocol of Bitcoin is much more sort of secure in that it's this protocol, and I think protocols tend to have a more fundamental sort of base that don't need to update as much to still be successful. Email as a protocol is very old. It gets set in stone. It works. You don't need to change it that much. I think Ether and Ethereum, they're really trying to continue to update. They're trying to continue to scale. So they have more to sort of develop over time, which I think makes it riskier for human error. And so, I don't think anyone knows what will happen to the future of Ethereum. Obviously, we don't know if this blockchain thing is an experiment that's going to, go south, or if it's going to be a giant market. My personal prediction, and again, obviously, do your own research. I actually think it's the best time ever to buy Ethereum. I think that, while it would have been better to buy it, for a few dollars, I think it's like $170 right now a share. I believe it peaked at like 2,000 or maybe even over 2,000. And I think if we see another bull run, I think it'll go beyond the previous all-time high. And for about, so I think it's one of the biggest asymmetrical bets. I think the first crash was the riskier crash, in my opinion. So I think it's the best time ever to buy Ethereum. And I'm very bullish on it, especially at the price. And I think, there's more and more projects that are sort of building and locking up Ether. And so we'll see, it's hard to say, but right now, I'm excited to see where it's at in 2 years.
Yeah, I think there would have to be a pretty massive stumble by the team to really set up a bad situation. I mean, the bottom feels like it's been in for a while now, over the last like 3 or 4 months. But things change quickly here. I would not invest anything that you're not willing to lose all of it into any kind of cryptocurrency, even if it is the number 2 on the current market cap. These things change quickly. But it is one of the, like you said, the most asymmetric bets that there are right now, Bitcoin or Ethereum, in my opinion. And my time horizon on something like this is 5 years.
Yeah.
If these coins move up and down quickly, so they're very volatile. If that's not something you're used to, and even when I first got into cryptocurrency, was something I had to get used to. But now, having gone through, a full cycle of boom and bust, I'm kind of a weathered veteran when it comes to. It doesn't phase me at all. In fact, I get bored watching my E-Trade account because it's much less volatile. But that's kind of what you're signing up for if you decide to go this route. So
Yeah, I like the recommendation of 1%. A lot of people are saying like just 1% of your portfolio, put it in there. You can afford to lose that, but the bet is such that, it could be 25x or whatever. So it makes sense. So I think that's a healthy thing to sort of watch. But yeah, I think it will be
all
very
in,
interesting to see.
all in.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
But awesome. Well, hopefully that's a more clear breakdown. It's very complex. We try to keep it as high level as possible. And thanks for tuning in. Later, Mike.
See ya.